do you say thank you to someone you've never even met face to face? How do you say thank you to someone you will never meet until the unthinkable happens? How do you say thank you to someone who selflessly puts themselves in harm's way without any thought of reward? That's what today is all about, saying thank you. For most of us, we have never met our first responders face to face until today, although there are friends here. But even though we've never met, this is our opportunity to say thank you. We want to take the time to express our gratitude for everything you do and the people you help. Working in such extreme situations and environments can be stressful and dangerous. Putting your lives on the line once is tough, but every day, rushing out to help someone without prejudice is a true, honest, brave act of kindness. Showing your bravery and fearlessness by facing difficult challenges. Working for the greater good of all people, regardless of who they are. Risking safety and comfort to go out each and every day, to go where you're needed. I'm sure that there are long hours and hard work, and it's tough, but you do it. How often does someone do something without expecting anything in return, without expecting something back? It takes a strong and determined person to make that kind of unselfish commitment. And I'm sure that while you do it, I'm really not sure if I could do it. And so I ask, why do you do it? I'm sure that it isn't for the money. I know you get an income, but sometimes that's hard to live on. And that doesn't even think about the people who do it on a volunteer basis. It isn't for the fame, because I'm sure that there is very little recognition, and few of your names are ever mentioned. And if they are, quite often, it's in negative circumstances. In fact, you're probably rarely recognized publicly. And I'm sure that, sadly, there are times when you are cursed and vilified, and I'm sorry for that. And it has to take a toll on you. We know, especially in the news of the last few weeks, that many of those in your profession suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. And it breaks my heart to think that there are those who have taken their lives because of the job that they do, the choice that they've made. So why? Why do you do it? You work in anonymity until it happens. The unimaginable, the unthinkable, the worst day of our lives, and then you rush in. A shining light, clothed in 50 pounds of protective gear, or in other circumstances carrying weaponry with the intent to defend us even at the risk of your own safety. You walk into highly volatile situations with the knowledge that you might have to make a split-second decision that will change the course of a life forever. Whatever the calamity, you're there. You go from anonymity to saving presence, all because of our discomfort and troubles. And there are many levels at which you exist. You answer the phone and dispatch. You keep the engine running. You train others. You administer policy. You drive to the scene. You keep the roads safe by working to ensure that we get home incident-free. You rush in to save and to listen and to help us cope. You operate as a team to combat that which we are least able to deal with. Far too often in our lives, we are in situations that we have no idea what we are supposed to do. And when we're in the midst of these scary situations, we respond humanly. We panic. We get frightened. We get scared. We buy into the terror that's right in front of us. You see this all the time, don't you? Walking into a situation, you can see fear on the faces. When you arrive at the scene of a house fire or accident or are called into a home, in any number of situations, you know what fear looks like. And you have been trained to be that calm face, that calm presence in the midst of that fear. So that even in the midst of that fear, when we're still thinking, or even before we thought, oh yeah, we should pray to God for this, to get us out of this. Even before we think of it, God has shown up. God is there. God is already involved, working within the lives of our first responders in ways that we can't even see because we are so busy panicking. God sends in the first responder. Someone or something to listen and lessen our fear and remind us that God is indeed with us. These people sitting in the sanctuary with us today, these first responders, are for our community that sign. They are the ones in the midst of emergency situations when panic is in full bloom, and that panic represents something that we know. But what they know, what their presence is something stronger than fear. They're the ones that walk strongly in the midst of and despite fear. And that is called a godly presence. In seemingly impossible situations, women and men, God sends into the midst of the fear. You are the presence of God for people. And I know probably you're squirming a little at that thought. But you know what? If you're not comfortable with that tag being a reminder of God's presence, is it because you think it's too much to live up to? You can play that card. But let me assure you that when something happens, when someone is in the midst of fear and they see you or someone else rushing in to help them, to be with them, and there's calmness, you are that person for them. You are exactly that. You are the reassurance and the compassion, and you know, and we see that caring is far stronger than our fear. And if it makes you feel better, at some point in every one of our lives, we are called on to be that kind of person for someone. God calls us into the midst of a situation, maybe not as traumatic as some of the ones that you face, but each and every one of us, God is calling into that situation at some point to do the Holy Spirit's work in that space. And God will use you, each and every one of you, and especially you. For all of us, it's clear that in the work of our first responders, we see the work of God here on earth, as they say, in real time. And you may not use that language as first responders, but you have to understand, all of you, that their commitment to do what is surely one of the finest examples of love and compassion, we need to see that. The love and compassion I'm talking about is not some mushy emotion, like on a Valentine's card that we'll see this week. It is real, it is brave, it is gutsy. Consider the realities of what our first responders do. They risk their lives. They put their whole being on the line for those in need, and they don't get to pick who they risk their lives for. All those categories that we use to judge people and segregate people and categorize people, they don't exist for first responders. They put themselves out there. They put themselves in life-threatening situations to help the one in danger, the one in need, and it doesn't matter who it is. What matters is they need help. Where else can we find this type of commitment? And who else would we find that type of commitment? You know the answer. Jesus showed us that type of commitment. Is this not how Jesus lived? Can you think of one instance where he turned away from someone in need? One instance where he did not show compassion and care. Embodying a commitment for love and compassion is a sign of great strength. For it is only in great strength that we are able to put the needs of others before ourselves. In the first verse that we read today, John describes Jesus' behavior, saying, having loved his own who were in the world, he now showed the full extent of his love. In this interaction, Peter is seeing for Jesus the true measure of his love. He was taking time to prepare them for what was coming, for what lied ahead. He knew that his time on earth was almost at an end. He knew he was going to leave this world and go to the Father. He knew he was approaching the most important moments of his life, and he knew the pain and the agony that awaited him in the days to come. So here's my question. If you knew that you were going to die a horrible, painful, tragic death tomorrow, what would you be thinking about? Certainly, I have to confess, I'm not certain I would be thinking of anyone but myself. How I would be feeling, what I had to deal with. But Jesus doesn't. Jesus, even in these moments, takes the time to think about the others. John is wanting us to see this. Fully God, fully man. Here is Jesus facing something we can't even imagine. And he's not saying to the disciples, don't you care about what I'm facing? Don't you care about what I'm feeling? He's not focused on himself. He's focused on them and preparing them for what's to happen. Always, he is focused on others. We see that throughout his ordeal. At his arrest, his concern was for his disciples, that they be let go. On the way to the cross, he took pity on the women he saw. When he was hanging on the cross, he was most concerned about his mother, how she would go on. And even in his last hours, he took time to minister to the thieves that hung beside him. Under maximum pressure, he was totally unselfish and loving. John is saying to us, Jesus knew what was coming. Verse 3 says, Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. Jesus knew who he was. There was no doubt. With all that in mind, before his disciples, he bowed down to wash their feet. He was not ignorant of the glory that was his, the authority that the Father had given him. But that didn't engender any pride or arrogance in him, in his heart. Have you ever seen someone who was pretty humble until a little recognition came their way? until a little prestige was there. It sometimes seems humility goes right out the window. How much honor can I handle before I'm filled with self-conceit? But Jesus had all authority in heaven and on earth, and yet he wasn't puffed up with boastful pride. And yet he bowed down and served others. Perhaps it was because he knew who he was, because he was secure in his identity, that he could bow down to the lowest of service. In these moments, we see Christ's love, Christ's grace, giving himself in service once again, even knowing what was to come in the days ahead. Giving your life in service is where we find fulfillment, ultimately. In verse 14, Jesus directly and specifically tells the disciples what the point of his actions are, why he is doing what he's doing. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. The lesson he wants us to learn: wash each other's feet. What does that mean? What does that mean? Well, in Jesus' day, you have to understand, it would be the very lowest servant who would wash feet. As people came in from traveling, there would be someone there to wash their feet, because they walked barefoot or in thin sandals. They walked on dusty, dirty roads alongside the animals, and there was dust and there was dirt, and they were stepping in other things that were on the road as well. And that lowly servant was the person that had to wash all of that off all of those feet, the very lowest. And yet, the Lord took it upon himself to wash their feet. For us today, it means that you humble yourself. You get down to where the need is and you do it. You wade into the muck and mess of lives, those that you can serve, those that may not even know they need it, right up until they do. There are people that will never stoop to wash feet, will never consider serving others. That person will not do these lowly tasks because they see it as a challenge to their identity. I'm not going to be seen doing something like that. I'm much more important than that. But I will say to you that it is not great people who will not serve others. It is insecure people. The ones that think feet washing and service is beneath them, something less, something for others to do. But it is precisely that willingness to serve, to be humble, to bow down and wash the feet of those who need it, that shows greatness, that shows strength. On the cross, Jesus showed that grace and greatness and strength in his ultimate expression of love for us. John 15:13 says, "Greater love has no man than that he lay down his life for his friends." That's what Jesus has done for you and for me. How do you say thank you to the Christ that you have never met face to face? How do you say thank you to the Christ that you will never meet until the unthinkable happens? How do you say thank you to the Christ who put himself in harm's way without any thought of reward? By taking and living what he said. I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, so you should wash each other's feet. By living in service to others every day, and what these responders do in service to us every day. Today, we take the time to express our gratitude that you, our first responders, fire, ambulance, first responders, police, and victim services, that you give your time in service to others. I said before, far too often in life, we have no idea what we are supposed to do. However, we do know what we can do today. We can thank you. We are grateful beyond words. God has blessed you. We just want to say thank you.